Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me. As Andre said, this is going to be a paper of thinking about advertising and like effectiveness of, well, the effects of advertising on welfare. And I'll look at it in a somewhat different way, in a somewhat different setting that we haven't studied before, looking into drug injury ads, which are also referred as bad drug ads. So just to set up things straight away, drug injury ads are these is a type of mass tort advertising where law firms are trying to reach potential plaintiffs for a lawsuit against a company. Hopefully some of you have seen something like this, and the ads are usually aired on TV, radio, or online. And it kind of like the script goes like something like this. Have you or a loved one taken Xarelto? If you or a loved one have taken one and experienced one of these very, very, very long list of side effects, or even death, you may be entitled for financial compensation. Call this number. So as you can see, it's a little bit of a different type of ad than anything else we studied before, and the setting's somewhat different. So it will be important to look at these ads separately from anything else because they have their own features. But kind of like just to recap and set us in here, as we'll look at drug injury ads and kind of bad drug ads, which are just these like master ads that are targeting medical devices and drugs. And the main reason why law firms like have these ads is to recruit potential plaintiffs for a mass tort. So you might ask, like, why do we need yet another study on advertising, right? Like, why is this different from everything else we've done before? And I have at least 3 reasons for this. The first piece is that oftentimes we might mainly connect advertising effects on quantities, and quantities are not always a great proxy for welfare. So this is a case where I can connect the effectiveness of ads not only to quantities, but also to health outcomes. So we can speak a little bit more about welfare. The second reason is that these ads can have some interesting effects we haven't studied before. On the one hand, they can inform viewers about the risks of drugs and their legal rights. So we can talk a lot about like this being a completely normal setting where just the lawyers are telling you about the potential risks of a drug. On the other hand, as you kind of heard, I know my representation of the script is not as great as these lawyers actually make it on TV, but you can see that, like sometimes these ads are really heavily emphasizing the negative effects of a drug, so they might misguide viewers and distort medical decisions. The main concern by physicians is that these ads are encouraging patients to stop taking their medications, even though they should continue taking their medications. So we have these positive and negative effects. And if we combine this with this piece that these ads reach both injured and non-injured viewers, we can kind of see that these ads can have like some form of externalities on the non-injured viewers. Yes, they're not intended towards them, but it might impact their decisions. The third reason for studying these ads is that this setting is almost completely unregulated. And we know from all our other studies or thinking about the FDA's actions that we do believe that advertising can affect patients' medical decisions. The FDA heavily regulates the advertising content of pharmaceutical companies, where like a lot of regulations of what they can say and what they can't say, making sure that they provide accurate information to viewers. This is in complete juxtaposition to what's happening with drug injury ads, where there's almost no oversight on content or anything else. These ads are under the jurisdiction of the FTC and state bars, so they're not under the jurisdiction of the FDA. So one might say like, well, that's the reason for it. So until recently, it's been the Wild West. You can more or less say anything you want to say in these ads. And only in 2019, we have like 2 states that enacted some regulations, which are more or less the bare minimum of like, just you can't say something that's blatantly false. But overall, like main idea here is that we have this lax regulation. There's some push to start regulating these ads. This would not be easy because this is protected speech under the First Amendment rights. So it's important to actually add in more information on potential negative effects or positive effects that can inform the policy debate. my setting would be to study like anticoagulant. Oops, sorry. My setting is the anticoagulant market. These drugs are used to reduce the risk of blood clots and stroke, which is the 5th leading cause of death in the US. So that's the setting in itself is super important. And my approach is going to be very simple. And hopefully I'll convince you like in a few slides, well, later on in the slides, that I don't need to worry as much about endogeneity because of the way lawyers are, I guess, buying ads. But I'll use geographic variation in ad exposure just to analyze ad effects on public health without having to do anything super fancy. So here are my research questions and findings. And after I go through this slide, I'll pause up, see if there are any questions. I have 2 simple questions. First one is what exactly the first thing we'll always do when it comes to advertising. Do we actually see an effect of advertising on prescriptions and quantities? And in this case, I say yes. There are 2 ways. First, I see a decrease in the ads for, a decrease in the prescriptions for targeted anticoagulants. So these are like the new drugs that got targeted by the lawsuits. And I see a 0.7% decrease in their prescriptions. Nicely, we do also see some shift to the older anticoagulant that wasn't targeted by the ads of 0.2%. And an overall the prescriptions fell down. So the shift towards the older anticoagulant was not large enough. Given these 2 pieces and combining them with the question of like, well, the ads can actually be good or bad, right? Like all the decreases might be coming from people who shouldn't be taking these drugs, right? Or the drugs are overly prescribed. So we do need to connect this with actual health outcomes in order to evaluate this, the welfare effects. So I ask like kind of 2 questions here. The first piece is like, do hospitalizations and death rates for relevant diagnoses increase? Here, relevant diagnoses are defined as diagnoses that are used to treat with anticoagulants. So think about like stroke, embolisms, any blood clots in any sort. And we do see, yes, unfortunately, that we see like an increase in these hospitalization and death rates for relevant diagnosis of 0.19 and 0.06. I'll put these numbers in perspective at the end and like match them up with clinical studies. But for now, like take my word for it as these seem very, very reasonable. The last piece is just looking at side effects because anticoagulants are relatively serious drugs and they do come with serious side effects. So the decrease in prescriptions might actually help us out by decreasing side effects. And the answer is like no, or you can think of it as that I can't reliably measure that. So just to wrap this whole piece up, overall, we find like very large negative welfare effects from drug injury ads, like this kind of like 1,000 hospitalizations and like 400 deaths. So these are non-trivial numbers when it comes to actual humans. And we can think of this as like 3 main pieces of contributions of this project is like new evidence that ads might actually misguide consumers. And this is not something that we've been able to study as often just because these settings are rare. The setting itself is important because it is studying like an important health condition and hopefully provides like some first order evidence for the recent debate on regulation. All right, do I have?
I can ask quickly if you put in for a question. Let me ask one quick thing. Maybe we'll talk about it later. So first of all, like would be great to see the estimates and the regressions. This sound like a very important effects and pretty large effects. I guess is there a step in the beginning where you'll tell us a bit about how accurate these ads are? Because in this case, you can think about ads kind of telling exactly what the FTC or like FDA or like any like health experts will say versus they can say some complete bullshit. And so I wonder if part of the first step will be you'll tell us a bit like how aligned they are, the ads content is with the recommendation of experts.
So this is a very nice question. And I'll address some of it, but not all of it. I'll tell you some of the tactics they use in the ad content that seems a little unethical, or at least that's what the lawyers have said, like that there seems to be unethical. But at the same time, like I am very open that what I can evaluate is the effect of the ads as they're currently implemented. So obviously I would not be able to say if we remove these concerns, if the ads are only portraying true information, what would be their effects, right? Like I can just say that given the way they implement it right now, this is the effect. But I don't have any variation in data about the content. So for the content piece, hold off like just a few slides and I'll tell you exactly the tactics they use, or at least the concerns that are brought up again and again, especially by the physicians. All right.
Sylvia, quick question. Yes. Is there regulation against negative false advertising against competitors?
I don't know. This one is mainly lawyers.
Yeah.
But they're not against competitors. And I think it goes through like this like freedom of speech thing. I read a little bit more about these Texas and Tennessee regulations. And like once they tried to enact them, then it went to like the state Supreme Courts, like until they were able to actually enact them. So like these were not like regulations that were easily went on the books, but the lawyers really fought them. Gotcha. Or some groups really fought them. So that's the one piece I know about this.
Yeah, thanks.
Two quick questions. So the first one is that when the law firm launched this kind of campaign, do you see the response from the pharmaceutical firms in terms of like, for example, they can, launch the DTC campaign to counter this kind of like, efforts, and or maybe they will increase the detailing efforts to reach the physicians, to persuade the physician to communicate with the patients, right? To mitigate this kind of negative effects. And the second question is, I imagine that some patients will be influenced by this kind of advertising campaign, but maybe the majority or more people actually will probably immune to this kind of efforts. So with this, do you test a different function form? For example, you try to see whether there's a diminishing effects. So when the firm increase more of such ads, the effects become smaller.
Okay. Yeah. The first question, the answer is simple. Yes, like you are exactly highlighting that there, like we need to be aware of omitted variables. There are only a few omitted variables that I would actually, you know what? Let me tackle the first one later on, because I would talk about at least some pieces of this. And I have tried everything also with detailing. It's just, hopefully I'll remember to tell you why I excluded detailing right now from the analysis. The second question is that my data is aggregate. It's a publicly available data sets. So I haven't tested like different functional forms, and a lot of it's been really driven by the data sets. So maybe you can tell me what you think after I give you a little bit more information on the pieces I actually have in it. But I guess both of them I would just defer them to like when I start talking about the estimation. All right. So very briefly, I just want to touch on the related literature. Like in marketing economics, we haven't touched anything about drug injury ads, but that doesn't mean other fields haven't. We definitely have like lawyers studying content of the ads and the lawsuits themselves. So that's where I'm going to infer some information from these like law journal articles. And then they've also looked a little bit more of like the reaction of consumers to these ads, mainly on using surveys. And I'm like, hey, did you trust this procedure or not? Did you trust these drugs after seeing the ads? In that way, like I think of this as the first study that's like fully comprehensive and like really understanding all of the effects, or at least trying to understand like the full effect of the ads given the data sets we have available. Naturally, I relate to like overall like the literature on pharmaceutical advertising effects, and like most closely related to the literature on how advertising affects health outcome and welfare overall. Some slight difference between like some really nice like recent papers and mine is that when it comes to most advertising we've seen, oftentimes you have a physician that presents a little bit of a gatekeeper towards like unnecessary procedures or unnecessary drugs or something like that actually helps like an educated person that helps guide the patient towards a better treatment. In my case, you can stop taking your drugs without talking to a physician. And that's actually one of the big concerns that physicians have. And this is also one of the big reasons why I think my effects are larger than what we'll usually see in other settings. Is you don't need, I mean, in other settings in the healthcare world, right? Like you don't need somebody to prescribe anything to you. You can just stop taking it. And the last piece is definitely like I connect to like papers of misinformation, and I do need to expand more on like ad content, but with the caveat obviously that Andre brought up, that I don't see changes in ad content. I only see whatever the firms are doing. So I'm going to first like tell you more about the drug injury advertising in the lawsuits, just so we add all that content. I'll pause there, and then we'll dig in more into the estimation pieces and the results. So mass torts are like mainly pled as a failure to warn type of lawsuits. That means that the lawyers come in and say like, well, the firm knew about a risk of the drug or the risk of the product, and they failed to adequately inform the public of these risks. So in that respect, right, like this does not mean that the drug is not safe to be taken by the people. It doesn't mean that the FDA has changed its recommendation about the drugs. It really just means that the firm did not adequately inform the public. So that means like with that in mind, now we know like, well, what would cause mass torts, and like what would trigger ad campaigns or like lawsuits? Well, the worst piece is like just new information, right? Because you kind of want to be like, well, you knew about this information and you didn't disclose it for us. So new information about previously undisclosed adverse effects. So changes in labeling is a very common trigger for lawsuits, or at least like for firms to start looking into like potential plaintiffs. Do they have an actual case? The second one kind of relates actually not about information about the drugs, but information about the financial rewards for the lawyers. So if I know that I'm going to make a lot of money from this mass tort, I'm going to invest a lot in getting a lot of plaintiffs and try to get into that. So lawsuit settlements or favorable verdicts are extreme triggers for an expansion of the ad campaigns and expansion afterwards of the lawsuits. And we'll see this in a second when we look at the anticoagulants. The last piece here, that the lawsuits, unlike a class action lawsuit, the mass torts involve a lot of claims and a lot of law firms. So even small law firms have a lot of incentives to try to gain a lot of plaintiffs, because those plaintiffs then like kind of come up to my bottom line. And because all of these law firms have incentives to gain plaintiffs, now we see a lot of advertising from different law firms, both small and large. Because as long as you have the plaintiffs, you're going to get some share of the pie. To like now like thinking about like Andre's question about the ads and like what might be some concerning pieces about the ads. Well, first piece is that they are going to emphasize serious adverse events. So when it comes to these ads, this is the main way in which the lawyers can reach potential plaintiffs. Like if you think about it, there's no other way in which you can educate people that you may have a claim. So in this case, Xarelto is one of the anticoagulants. That's why I keep on using that as an example. We have GI bleeding. That's definitely a side effect. Stroke is the thing that the drug is actually treating. Bleeding, hospitalization, and death. I mean, technically, I don't know, like depending on the death piece, that is something that the drug is actually treating. The FTC sent a few warning letters in 2019 as well, where there was some guy where they were like really pushing it. It was like a diabetes drug, and they'll say like it can lead to amputation, and that at that point, like they can really go really off script. In terms of like the side effects they kind of go after. But oftentimes, like one of the side effects they'll put in is the actual thing that the drug is actually treating, and that really confuses people. What's going on here? The other really unkosher way of doing this is that the information is always sometimes presented as medical alert, drug alert, FDA alert, kind of like sounding as if like this is coming from the FDA or the government. And that's actually the one thing that is being regulated by the Texas and the Tennessee laws. So these laws are not super strict. They're just really saying like you can't say something is coming from the government if it's not coming from the government. So that's kind of like a big piece to that. Then ads fail to like, most ads don't say anything about consulting a physician, like don't stop your medications without consulting somebody. And then according to this lawyer, like she actually read through many of these. She said like this could be considered misleading until the under the state ethics rules, which I'm sorry, I don't know what these are. That's why I'm quoting the lawyers on this one. So this is kind of like the main concern on that. This is also the reason why one might think the effects might be large. And this is why we worry about them from a policy perspective. Now, when it comes to the anticoagulants, as we saw, like they treat stroke, clots, and systemic embolism. That also means that the largest population taking these drugs is older patients, so it's appropriate for me to use Medicare data, and that's what I'll use, publicly available Medicare data. There are 4 drugs on the market, one really old guy, warfarin, that was introduced in the 50s, and 3 drugs that enter kind of right before my sample period. These are non-vitamin K oral anticoagulants. I'll just call them NOACs everywhere. And also that kind of helps us figure out these are the new guys. As you can see from my graph here, warfarin loses popularity over time, and these guys like keep on rising up in popularity. And there are good reasons for that. According to clinical studies, they're considered to be both safer and more effective. And the main, in terms of like more effective at preventing stroke and then blood clots and all that stuff. And when it comes to safer, the main risk of both the warfarin and NOACs is the severe risk of bleeding. And it turns out, again, using those clinical trials, the new drugs are definitely safer. So the fact that law firms target the new drugs is not because they're worse drugs. They did not fully potentially disclose all the information that was there, right? So that's kind of like a big piece on this, and the reason why, you know, like even if the lawsuits are not frivolous, we still have this concern on the health outcomes, right? The lawsuits might be completely legitimate, but it might still discourage patients from taking better drugs, or like safer drugs or more effective drugs. One quick note is warfarin is much cheaper than the NOACs, but I'm not going to use that as a calculation anywhere because it also requires a lot of blood work, and I just don't know the cost of either of these things, so it's really hard to kind of combine like which one is actually going to be cheaper to the healthcare system. So I know some of you are thinking about like on patent, off patent. I've thought about it, but I'm staying out of it for these reasons. All right. Last slide on this piece is to tell you the story about how the lawsuits actually happened in this market. So the lawsuits, again, like allege that the NOACs did not adequately disclose the risk of severe bleeding. It's not that they're worse than the older drug or anything else. It's just they did not adequately disclose it. The initial wave was in 2012, targeting Pradaxa, which was the only drug that was available at the time. And you can see like this increase, like this is my drug injury ads. They increase over time, like until 2013. They gathered some patients. There are some bellwether trials here that are going through the trials. And then over here in 2014, Pradaxa settles. So I don't think we have any questions of what triggers the ads, right? It's like really, it's just a settlement. Once they settled, and like they settled despite winning in the courtrooms, just because most of the firms, my understanding is like they don't like to take the risk of like a like unpredictable judge or unpredictable jury or anything else. They like to settle. Once you settle, now the ads explode for like Pradaxa and Xarelto especially. And here, the reason why they exploded for Pradaxa is because like many of the lawyers are now trying to get into the $650 million settlement, right? Because now they're going to be starting to figure out like how do we divide the settlement based on everybody who is hurt. So this is the ad campaign that I'm going to study in my data, because my data starts in my prescription level data starts in 2015. So this is going to be the big piece. The one thing I want to highlight here is that because the settlement triggers the ads, at least like I know that there is no new scientific evidence or anything else that triggers the advertising and the lawsuits. All right, let me pause here before moving to the next pieces, because I'm not going to talk about the lawsuits again.
I have a super naive question. So after they have the settlement and they know this is happening, why not just add this, tiny font saying the risk? Wouldn't that be like easier for the company?
Yeah, so they do that, right? They do that, like, so sometimes, right, they do that the moment they know, or the moment the FDA makes them add like more warnings on the labels or whatever else it is. But that's where the lawyers are trying to get as many patients who were taking the drugs before the settlement, right? No, sorry, not before the settlement, before the change in labeling, before the change in disclosure. I think that's why you need to show that the damage, or I suspect the damage was done before the release of the new information, right? But you're completely right. Like once if you find somebody, say like if a drug puts like all the bells and whistles in 2015 and somebody starts taking the drug in 2016, they can't be part of the lawsuit, right? They had all the information they needed.
So can I clarify this again as well? So like, all the ads from 14 to 18 is not for a new lawsuit, but just to divide the 650. Then I guess, why is there also ads against Xarelto, which wasn't part of the settlement? I guess
yeah. No, they're great question. All right, so the new ads are mainly against like those two. The Pradaxa ads, you'll be like, it's just I was clarifying that the Pradaxa ads are mainly to divide the 650 million. The Xarelto ads were going after a new company. These were like,
the accelerator is for the new lawsuit. The products, I see. Got it.
Xarelto had a new lawsuit, and like Xarelto was settled in 2019 and stuff. But like again, like a little bit of like there was no other spike in 2019 because this really like took out like all of the market, right? Like they really like found out everybody who might have been hurt during that period. All right.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, let's go. So now let me go through data and estimation, then we can stop at estimation and then talk about all of the assumptions I'm making. So first piece of the data is that I have 6 sources. The first 3 are looking at health, at prescriptions and health outcomes. These are publicly available, so they have a lot of drawbacks. But I also like the idea of being publicly available, and it's very hard to find these, to get these from the CMS datasets. So I'm going to have prescription information for Medicare Part D. These are the physician ear drug level, right? So one big problem is like, yes, it's at the ear level. And that's the main reason why I might worry a little bit about endogeneity, and we'll talk about it. The other big drawback of this is like, I don't know if some of the prescriptions are new prescriptions or refills. I think that would be super important and useful to know, but I don't have that data. The next 2 data sets are on hospitalizations and death rates.
Sorry, Sylvia, don't they have information on beneficiaries, number of beneficiaries?
Yes, but I need to check on that.
Yeah, so you'd be able to, those are my question. Like, is it like really from drug adherent going down, like, less refill or, not enough, less fewer. Yeah, so that might be able to.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, that can tell us a little bit about it. I'll look into that. Thank you. I have not used that variable yet. Thank you. Let me try this. Yes, any information on like anything health related, please do that. I mean, I'm brand new to the health piece and the advertising piece, I guess. So I'm very happy to get any suggestions. When it comes to the health, like the hospitalization, I use again like the CMS data set on inpatient hospital visits, where I have them at the hospital year diagnosis for all hospitals that accept Medicare payments. Death rates I was able to get from the CDC, so that's why I was able to get it at the quarter level, and we'll try to play a little bit with that just to get us a little bit more granular. But in full disclosure, the diagnosis here is going to be a much larger group. Like I had to combine many diagnoses in order to be able to extract the data at the county quarter diagnosis level because of privacy pieces. So this is all publicly available. Now, next piece is my advertising and variables that I'm thinking about controlling for omitted variables. My master advertising is going to come from this consulting company who gets really cleaned up version of the Vivix, which used to be Kantar, Kantar advertising data. The main reason why I get it from them is because like they're the only ones for whom like Vivix gives like a really cleaned up version of the ads. While let's say if you use Ad Intel, you won't be able to pick up all of these ads because they'll be just called like lawsuit ads, but they won't tell you for what. So this is the usual TV data set at the DMA month level, and I have ad spending from them. I was thinking exactly about omitted variables or companies reacting to this. So I collected data from the from direct-to-consumer advertising from Ad Intel for the 3 brands, the Xarelto, Pradaxa, and Eliquis, and that is at the DMA month drug level. I also have the data for physician payments. I don't include it today because it starts at 2016. So it's kind of like you need to keep track of different sample periods, but more or less the answer is the same, that the results stay consistent once we include those variables as well. Last piece of omitted variable is like newspaper articles that I was able to collect at the state month level. I think I could do a little bit better than state nowadays because I got access to an additional data set. So I might be able to fix this one a little bit more. All right, now I am going to run through this in the interest of time, but this also kind of gives us an idea of the variables I'll be using for my regressions. So on prescription side, I have 4 like variables. One of them is total anticoagulant prescriptions, then the prescriptions of the NOACs, the warfarin prescriptions, and I have these placebo prescriptions, which are identified as top drugs based on prescriptions that do not treat anything with heart cardiovascular system. Like, so I wanted something that has nothing to do with the cardiovascular system. When it comes to hospitalization, we do exactly something similar. We have relevant diagnoses related to stroke, side effects of hemorrhaging, and the placebo are cancer and respiratory diseases. So I always wanted to do a placebo thing on all of these. Death rates, I have the relevant and placebo. I could not detect the side effects because there isn't such a thing as death from hemorrhaging. I mean, you know what I mean? It was really hard to kind of get this. Here, though, the relevant diagnosis is going to be larger. It's an ICD code of like anything from the circulatory system, and the placebo is similar to before, cancer and respiratory diseases. When it comes to advertising, we mainly have the drug injury and direct-to-consumer ads. You'll see the drug injury ads are like much smaller than direct-to-consumer ads. So like, you know, like you might be like, wow, these get like just washed away. They're smaller, but they're also a lot harder to ignore, like when you think about like the message that they're actually sending. So that's why I think they are much, much more effective.
But the DTC ads includes national ads, right?
Yes.
Is that why it's so much higher? But then injury ads probably mostly local.
So drug injury, so sorry, okay, that's exactly what I was about to show. So drug injury ads is both local and national, and these guys, like, that's why Exantis data is great on this, because there's some venture capital money in it. Like it's, anyways, I'm not gonna go into, I have 10 minutes, so I'll stay short on this, but local ads are about 20%. So it's much larger than any other advertising we've ever seen. 20% local ads is a lot. And these are exactly these like small law firms that, well, then they don't need to be small, but they're local law firms, and they also want a slice of the pie, and they're just advertising in their areas. And that's the main reason why I think like things don't change much when I added additional controls or do like border strategies or anything else. It's just we don't have that much endogeneity in these decisions. One quick thing again, let me show it now. But we might worry is I'll use exactly variation and the DMA variation across DMAs in years, but you can see that we have a good amount of variation across like over time, like on these pieces. So like, so I have enough variation in terms of the drug injury ads across locations and time.
Sylvia, very quickly from Q&A from Mitch Lovett, was there any other outreach to consumers like direct mail or other direct contacts?
No, direct mail there wouldn't be, but he's correct that there might be two other ways in which I don't control for. I don't have access to that. One of them is on the radio. I have heard like some of ads like this on the radio. I just don't have the data. And the other one might be online. Online nowadays is a big deal of how to reach consumers. 2015 to 19 is definitely picking up, And again, I don't have the data on that. So if there are any suggestions, would love it. All right.
One
Cool.
suggestion is even from just the aggregate Vivix data, you can get the proportion they spend on TV versus say online.
Yeah, I don't have access to the Vivix data itself. This was granted for free from this ex-ante firm. But I can try more. Thank you. So at least so we get at least some information on what's the share of TV versus anything else. All right. So here's like what we're gonna do, like really simple. We use the cross-sectional variation in timing and intensity to back up, hopefully, I'll convince you causal effects of drug injury ads on prescriptions and health outcomes. So, right, like the whole point is a two-way fixed effect. So let's think about like, is this a good strategy? So the main endogeneity problem that I can think of is that law firms are going to advertise more in places where they expect to get more viewers to file a lawsuit or to contact them, and they can be like good plaintiffs. That can create spurious correlations, I think, in two ways. One of them is they'll advertise more in places with growing popularity of the NOACs, or one might say, well, decreasing popularity of the NOACs, whatever else it is. I think it's growing popularity because like that creates like a larger base of people we can use for the lawsuits. And the other one is that you might advertise more in areas where viewers are both more likely to respond to the ad and in file a lawsuit, and also respond to the ad and stop taking your medications, right? It's kind of that responsiveness to the ad might be correlated. This one, I think, is more innocuous, is not a big deal, and we don't expect viewers' responsiveness to drug injury ads to change over time. So my location fixed effects should capture that. So I'm not as worried about this one. This one, kind of this whole idea of like you might advertise more in places where you might have a larger number of potential plaintiffs. I do worry a lot more about this one. And this is why, and one of the tables I'll show you is like, I'll show you how the results change once we add lagged prescriptions of the new drugs to capture the number of potential plaintiffs. So nothing, like not much changes on that, but we should try this out. The other thing I did is as we saw like in the previous table, we have a lot of, for each outcome, I have a placebo. So we're gonna run the placebos and make sure that I'm not missing something about Medicare patients and the trends about Medicare patients across different areas. So we're not capturing just that. And I'm gonna confirm the results hold with Shapiro's border strategy that more or less just takes into account that the fact that when you buy like the ads in a DMA, you're not perfectly targeting at the borders versus some like the larger cities. And finally, I'm going to control for omitted variables. For me, it's the direct consumer advertising, the news articles. I've done things with the open payments data set. It's just today I'm not including it in this. But fair point that I should put that I don't observe the if there are other ads from the lawyers, I don't observe those. My regressions are pretty straightforward. Like I'm going to have 3 versions with prescription, hospitalization, and death rate. Death rates. At each one of them, for example, let me walk through the prescription one. We're going to have exactly the NOACs, warfarin, total, anticoagulants, and placebo. I'm going to regress prescriptions that are in this case at the physician in a DMA year level. I'm going to regress it on the drug injury ads, the lagged drug injury ads. We're going to include the physician and year fixed effects. And this X is going to exactly include the lagged prescriptions and potential omitted variables for controls. I'm going to do this in a level form and like all of the pieces. And that's why it was like important we see that we have enough variation in the ads to sustain like level in level regression. I'm going to do the same thing for hospitalization analysis. However, here, obviously, the level of observation is the hospital. And when it comes to death analysis, the level of observation is at the county quarter level. And I'll follow paper by Brad Shapiro and like be like, I'm going to cluster the standard errors 2-way one at the DMA year and the other one the location, which location could be physician, hospital, and county. All right, let me pause again here because this is what I'll do for the regressions. They'll be very simple. We'll look at several results to kind of, especially with prescriptions, to evaluate the potential for endogeneity. But I think in my setting, the fact that we have these small law firms that advertise a lot and only doing the level of advertising, so I'm not using any of the national ads, then I think like the endogeneity concerns, like at least like they don't play out in the things I've tested. All right, well, I'm gonna jump straight in. Like I definitely won't finish in 45. Okay, so here are my main results. Here we're going to, I'm regressing just like the prescription data. So first we have the not prescriptions, we see a decrease, and also the lag also has a decrease. I'm gonna tell you about the sizes at the end. Right now I'm just gonna go through the signs and like just look at like the estimates themselves. We can evaluate what this means later. For foreign, we see some of that shift towards for foreign. And however, that shift is not large enough to compensate for the decrease in the NOACs. So we have an overall decrease. A few things now here on those endogeneity concerns. The first piece is as I said, we're gonna control for the for NOAC prescriptions in the last year. And these estimates barely budged on NOAC prescriptions and all prescriptions. It's not even that they're still significant or anything else, just the estimates did not change much, which is super reassuring to me. And then I get absolutely nothing on the placebos. If anything, they're kind of in the positive sides and kind of like very, very noisy.
Maybe one thing you can do is to check the interaction between the injury ads and then the pharmaceutical firms ads. So pharmaceutical ads firms are usually targeted to, new patients, and I'm just wondering, those injury ads, do they like, attenuate the effect of those ads? Then, some of the decrease might be due to new patients. But if you find nothing, then that's kind of another way to say, it's probably mostly decreases from refills, patients not adhering to drugs.
So when it comes, I don't have this table right now here, but I do have like a little bit of, did direct-to-consumer ads actually respond to drug injury ads? And I don't know. You can squint and look at it in either way, but there's nothing super convincing there. What I did with direct-to-consumer ads right now is just include them in the regressions as an omitted variable. And this, I'll show you in a second how this looks like with the border strategy, and this is the only column that changes around. But I would not interpret this in any way, right? Like this completely endogenous. I'm not controlling for anything on the DTC ads. And I'm just very cautious that I don't have enough like instruments and variation to really control for the DTC endogeneity. So that's been like the main reason why I've been holding off on this. But maybe after, in the discussion afterwards, you can tell me a little bit more about that. I find it interesting. I'm mainly cautious about kind of the endogeneity of DTC ads.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying about the effect size at all. It's just kind of try to understand the mechanism. Yeah. Does the injury ads? It's just directional, obviously. Does the interaction effect? Is the interaction like negative, like decrease the DTC ads a little bit, or? Mm-hmm. Then does it affect new patients, or is it mainly affecting kind of existing patients? Okay. Of course, this it's not fully controlled, but
yeah, I'll see if I can do something about that. But thank you. So main thing from this one is, again, newspaper articles don't do much. Here we have some decreases. So maybe DTC ads is an important omitted variable. And that's the main reason why I did in the last piece, like using borders and seeing how do effects change when we use borders. And my main effects don't change much when we do borders, but the DTC ad becomes completely irrelevant at that. And it's my first time doing much with advertising, so I'd love to hear if anybody has a specific explanation. In my mind, it's just telling me that there is something endogenous about DTC ads, and obviously my previous regression was not trying to do any, was not trying to control for it in any ways. All right, let's go for the more fun things. Okay, we've done this. We see like ads affect prescriptions. However, we don't know what is like, what are the welfare effects? On the one hand, decrease in prescriptions can improve public health because it's going to reduce bleeding events. Right? Anticoagulants have serious side effects. On the other hand, we might have deterioration in public health through increases in stroke events. Right? And this can happen if anticoagulants prevent stroke, or if NOACs are more effective than warfarin at preventing stroke. Right? Like both of these pieces would help me out. I can't test either. Like, I have the total effect, so I don't know which one would be driving it. We have a meta-analysis that tells me that NOACs are both better at preventing stroke and have fewer bleeding events. So, until we think like this is going to be the main driver. It's going to be just these worse events. So let's kind of see if my results actually show the same thing.
Sylvia, can I jump back quickly to, I think, tables 2 and 3? This is like another question in the Q&A about interpretation of this NOAC prescription in T-1. This coefficient of 0.002, should we interpret this as like it's not this prescription not persistent at all over time? Or like, this is from Mitch Lovett again, like, is it surprising given the category, and like how we should think about this?
Yeah, so I'll have to think about it. That I guess like that's my main answer. Because I don't know how many of these are new prescriptions, right? Like this is a growing category. Because we saw like the trends over time in my data. And because it's a growing category, that's why maybe I don't have like as large estimates as what we would have expected, given the fact that this is a chronic condition. But I'll have to just check it out a little bit more. All right.
But the interpretation of this is level on level. So this is saying a previous level of the things have kind of, it should be, if it was perfectly persistent, the coefficient should be 1. Do I get it correctly?
I mean, I don't, it has like, I have physician and ear fixed effects. I have a lot of fixed effects in this. So that's why I need to sit down and think about it a little bit more.
Got it.
It's a fair question that I don't have an answer to today. But it's mainly the fixed effects is the main reason why I'm being cautious about interpreting this.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. All right, so let me jump into those results. And the first piece is about inpatient hospital visits. Here, again, what I'll do, I only have one table for these guys. I have the direct injury ads in like first 3 columns. I don't find anything when I lag it. We do have, DTC ads being positive. We're not interpreting them at all. We're just putting it there to see how my main effects change. And not much on the news. These are completely, like, they're so noisy that I do need to do. Hopefully I will be able to update that variable. And here I'm interpreting this as obviously like in places where we have more people taking these drugs, obviously we have more negative events. Here, when I try to do the border thing, I have less than 1,000 observations. I put so many fixed effects. I am not surprised that nothing happens. But if you guys want to do it as a 0, that's okay as well. It's not, I don't think it's that central to the paper. We have nothing on placebo and nothing on side effects, both because they're like much, much smaller and noisily estimated. When it comes to death rates, here I have it both at the annual and quarterly level, but today I just picked up the quarterly level just to make it more interesting and show you a separate thing. Here we definitely have like the drug injury ads today have an effect, but it's like once I allow for the lagged version, I have like it more or less it comes up with a quarter lag. I would say not super surprising that it might take like, a quarter may be too much, but it might take a little bit of time for somebody to stop their medication, and then like our healthcare system is good enough that they can keep you alive for a little bit. Or maybe I'm like just too dark in this, but I'm not super surprised that we have a quarter lag. And again, nothing on placebos, nothing with cancer and respiratory diseases, so we're not missing much on this. I'm really short on time, so I just have 2 slides of concluding now to put just the numbers in perspective. As I told you, I have the numbers in here. So we have drops in prescriptions, as we saw before. We definitely have, like here I did like a 10% increase in advertising is from the average. It's about like a $40 increase in ads per household. So a 10% increase in ad is about 0.70 drop in NOACs, and that's about 94K number of fills. We also have the same drop for anticoagulants. Now, the more fun thing is to look at these relevant diagnoses. First piece I wanted to highlight is like, yes, when it comes to health outcomes, my confidence intervals are much larger than what they will be with prescriptions, but that's expected. We know that with health outcomes, we have much larger like confidence intervals because there are many things that affect health outcomes, and I want to be very upfront about those. But we have some non-trivial number of hospitalizations and deaths. These are, I would say, large. So one big question is like, what would clinical studies predict? Clinical studies would predict that the 0.7% drop in NOACs would lead to like that 0.13 increase in hospitalization. I would say that's pretty close. And then when it comes to deaths, I have no idea how I got so lucky. I'm like hitting it right on top of it. But all I want to say here is not like my numbers match a lot, but these are definitely in my confidence intervals. So I am not like being completely off from what clinical studies would say. And then if we put it in dollar values, you know, we're on like 106 million. I don't know. I would say like maybe 400 deaths might be a little bit more than 106 million in cost, but it's not my job to like diagnose like the cost estimates. All right, few things to just conclude. I'm thinking this is first order evidence that drug injury ads can affect health outcomes, especially this confirms the concerns by medical professionals, and this provides insights to this like timely debate on regulating these ads, finding support for like tighter oversight if we care about people dying. And I'm thinking a little bit more exactly of like, can this also tell us something about drug adherence and how that would play out? All right, I am very late, but this is the end of it, and hopefully we got most questions answered.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, this is great. I think we have 6 more minutes for a discussion. We can stay afterwards to have a more informal discussion. So I leave. If by the way, if anyone in the audience wants to ask or join the panel, ask questions live, please just raise your hand. We'll add you as well, or just feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. I'll keep asking them. I guess one quick question, Sylvia, I have is how to think about the variation in ads during this period from this law firms. You initially motivated saying there is no new information which is revealed in that period because after the lawsuit, all they're doing is trying to get their buy from the settlement money. It seems like, and maybe I don't know the context, but it seems like there was this ads for the new drug. If I'm a physician, I might be thinking, well, we knew there was a side effects. Now this new drug, which is the same type, also have the side effects. So the obvious story of the indigeneity is the physicians getting some actual new information and maybe incorrectly telling the patients what to do. So I guess 2 parts of this question, like one, is there something in the data where kind of it's easy to rule this out? And maybe I'm just confused and maybe it's a very small part of the new information. And second, if there is another kind of a different way to interpret the facts, is it persuasion of patients or physicians, where maybe it's not the patients who are persuaded, maybe it's physicians who are persuaded and they overestimate the risk of the side effects now?
So that's great. So first piece is, when I say there's no new information, like I should have been more clear. There's no new information to the lawyers during that period. They're kind of going after these patients. I mean, okay, there might be new information in terms of like how many people they keep on getting in terms of from each area, in terms of number of people calling them. So that's one thing I just don't have access to. But also most law firms are local. So they are mainly advertising in their local areas. Now, and there is no new information from the drug's perspective, right? Like, so the one piece that, yeah, in full honesty, there might be new information when it comes to the effectiveness of my ads in terms of getting patients, like getting plaintiffs, right? The second question was a little bit of like, is it the patient or is it the physicians? I love it. I can't do much about that one. I used to have, I've looked a little bit of like who is the one responding. Is it the GPs, like is it the primary care physicians or is it the specialists, right? Because you might think like, well, the primary care physicians like might be more responsive to these ads because they don't know enough, and the specialists will know pretty well about the drugs. And that intuition was confirmed. It is the primary care physicians who are the most responsive, but it was getting confusing because again, I don't know. Is it the the primary care physicians were the ones shifting their patients into the older drug. And the specialists were more or less just like losing patients. Kind of, well, I don't know if they're losing patients, but they're kind of like, they're not shifting people around as much. But then I realized that, I don't know, it's like too many interpretations for like a data set that doesn't provide all of this. I am trying to get the CMS data, but that'll take like a year or so. I'm thinking that can be a separate analysis of what we can do with once we actually have like physician-patient observations and really can track out people. There I was thinking about putting a little bit more about drug adherence once we have like an external shock, and we can actually analyze more of those trends and what drives those. But
Yeah, because switching to warfarin, you really need a physician's blessing, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like they're responding, and the question is, are they really watching these ads and respond to these that piece? I mean, yeah, so data-wise, it sounds like they're responding because they're switching. They're prescribing more older drugs. They're less effective. That's
So here's the thing that I don't know, right? Like, you go to, is it that they're switching to warfarin because you have a patient coming to you and saying like, I don't want to take this drug anymore, right? And I won't take any other drug. I don't want to see any of these. Are they switching to warfarin for their new patients because now the physician is actually influenced by the ads? And that's where I was like, this is just too much and like too speculative given what I have. While for the specialist, they might be just like not having a nice connection with the patients, the patient like trying to decide to like do their own thing, while with the primary care, you anyways need to go check out on the other stuff. So there were like way too many explanations, and I thought that it's too speculative given what I have as a data set. With a CMS level data set, that you can definitely answer that, right? Because we can look at new patients versus existing patients and try to split things at least a little bit.